What's up, everybody? Cinephile Mike here. I have the pleasure of sitting today with Luke Angus. Luke is an award-winning filmmaker and animator whose work blends striking visual precision with real deep human storytelling. Following the success of his sci-fi short Alienated, Luke is back now with Solstice, an animated short set in the Arctic Circle that explores grief, devotion, and isolation through image, rhythm, place, and is now also nominated for a BAFTA this year for Best British Animated Short. Luke, how are you today?
Even you saying that doesn't sound real yet. It still sounds so crazy, but yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks. Thank you for having me on here.
So, coming back after the recognition that Alienated received, what drew you towards something as quiet and emotionally restrained as Solstice?
I think Alienated always felt like my it was my calling for something sci-fi and really hard-hitting sci-fi and quite like unapologetic hard sci-fi where there's a lot of physics at play that I don't necessarily explain. I just assume there's some knowledge behind it for the viewer of understanding light travel and all these kind of it felt like for a quite a niche audience of sort of sci-fi enthusiasts maybe. But it had this similar themes at the core of it being loss and isolation and dealing with grief and so then some of these I've got a sort of notepad of so many ideas for short films that I've scribbled down a few ideas and what it might be and I leave it. And then I was noticing a sort of trend in a few of them having these similar themes, and they were about in these sparse, barren environments that lend themselves so well to themes of loss and grief, and almost like mentally that that's how you're feeling. And these, you might be in a sort of busy environment physically, but you might feel like you're just on your own in the middle of nowhere. And so alienated being set on this isolated moon and a planet that to completely empty with this one character, and then Solstice of being this companion piece to Alienated, and it's very intentional. As I was writing it, I was borrowing a lot of structure and pacing and even like some little physical gags or anything from Alienated. And I've my idea is there's a third film I'm developing that it is almost this like anthology, this trilogy of films which share this language, share similar themes, and have a lot of yeah, like I don't know if you know the Cornetto trilogy. That same
Yep,
idea where you've got like yeah, they're standalone films doing their
very
own thing, but
much.
they also have a lot of little like funny gags that for some reason they carry across, or like little motifs that they carry across. So I obviously connect with that a lot, and they quite naturally fell into these multiple ideas I had, being like, oh, why don't I try and write these in a sort of anthological way? And it's been fun to do. Yeah.
And through your work, you consistently trust visual storytelling over dialogue. What
Mhm.
do you find most expressive about telling stories these ways?
I think there's just something like at least for me, but I think it is more than I think it is something human about like having to maybe work a bit harder to to extract the story from what you're watching. I think when you're told something through dialogue or sort of exposition something, you're just told it and then you get it and you're like, okay, thanks for telling me. And then your brain didn't have to do much work there. When you've got to pay attention to all like on-screen clues and your eyes being led to the right place in frame at the right time to understand these kind of complex stories, your brain just has to work a little bit harder. And I think therefore you're almost like subconsciously rewarded a bit more for when you get to the end of that story and you understood everything and not a word was spoken. There's just like language being spoken between the filmmaker and the viewer that I think is like there's a connection there that I think is like inherently rewarding. I don't think we know it's happening. I think it is just like as you're watching it and you're almost surprised that you're following along in these somewhat complicated little stories. And I think yeah, paired with quite high concept ideas, like Solstice is quite a high concept idea. It's not, so I think, and Pixar do that very well. They're sort of pioneers of this format in their short form telling and through the 90s and early 2000s. They always had really, really high concept ideas, kind of strange settings and scenarios and stuff, but no dialogue. And so it's almost like a magic trick where yeah, you're giving the right piece at the right time and revealing things at the right time, and then there's twists and I think yeah, I think it is a fundamental um like mental stimulation that we enjoy to piece it all together ourselves and feel like we earned it a bit more than just being told it. It's probably a really long-winded way of saying like show don't tell, but like that I think is what's happening and why that is a really good piece of advice. I think that's what's happening in internally. Yeah, and I enjoy the challenge is the final note.
And with that, when you have no dialogue, the music carries
Mm,
such an emotional responsibility. How do you
yeah.
think about the score as a way of guiding the audience's inner experiences? And what have those conversations been like with your colleagues?
Yeah. I mean the score is massive just in that there's so much weight placed on it to you like your story and you should have your story in a position and in a place where you can understand it without the score, without relying on the score.
Mhm.
It should, to me, it should be this like elevation of everything. It's like an
Yeah.
emphasis on certain beats. It should be you can already tell what's happening and what the character should be feeling without the score. But when you add that in and you bring that in as a sort of like component, it just elevates everything. It's scary it's a powerful tool. It's like scary because I put so much work into the visuals and the edit and everything. It's scary that you can sort of fall at the last hurdle if you don't get the music right or the score right. And all that work you put in is almost for nothing, or it can do the opposite and it can like ruin it and cheapen it or and so it was very, very, very challenging. So I made the film completely on my own. Um and then the collaboration was with music, where I
Right.
basically sourced some artists who I like loved the work of what they do, and I found three separate artists who all shared, for my ear, similar themes, and even the instruments they were using were somewhat comparable, and like they were like where maybe strings or somewhat atonal, like um a bit more. They just stood out to me as something they had such a language and such an identity that, but at the same time they all felt cohesive, and even though they were three separate artists working completely separately, and it was my job to basically license some tracks of theirs and use some stems across basically mix together three different artists' music for the three sort of acts and sections and structure of the film to create this somewhat cohesive piece that I'm so happy at the response the music has been getting with the because this is a process I hadn't done before. Alienated previously, I had a score written for it, just like, sort of beat for beat, just following the exact emotions of it. Whereas this one sits a little bit further back, where it is the sort of an underlying it sells the pace and the tone, but it's not necessarily hitting all the beats of like action when he picks up the spear. It's not getting a little flourish in that moment. It's not so. And then also this idea of stringing together three sort of separate artists and their work and hoping it sounds like one unified piece. And it seems like it's worked
It
from the
does.
reception it's getting released. So that's been really relieving, I suppose, is probably the main thing. Yeah.
So when you blend the music and the performances, since you're working without the dialogue, how do you approach performance, like the performance of the characters in animation with the movement
Yeah.
and the framing?
Well, that is, I would think, well, so that my animation is my sort of trained profession. That's what I do in my for what I was trained in, went to university for, like animation specifically. That's kind of where it all started, is me getting sort of loving animation, and then all the other sort of pipeline tools either side of that, whether it's 3D modeling or character design or lighting and simulate, all the other stuff came as like stemmed from animation. But because of that, I think the animation is maybe what I have the keenest eye for in the whole pipeline. Um, so I find that all the sort of 101 animation rules are being sort of adhered to as best I can, with like silhouetting and with timing and pacing and strong composition and all these things that you do as an animator are sort of the things I am most honed at. So that elite, I think, is where the storytelling in that regard comes through quite strong, because I come to the table with that as my like primary skill, and then everything else I'm kind of learning and figuring out and getting, advice from friends here or there. And but the animation is one I'm a bit more confident with, and the animation itself is very simple in the film. There's nothing fancy going on. The actual movement of the character, he just kind of plods along and he goes through his day, and he's not doing some big fight scene or some backflips and
Yeah.
action scenes and car chases, all the maybe more complicated animation. So the animation is actually quite simple, but that's also through the necessity with just like keeping it simple and keeping it clear and very communicative. Yeah.
Clear but expressive. All I wanted to do was give him a hug.
Yeah, I know. It would be a really warm, cuddly, fuzzy hug.
In part because I want to comfort him, but I'm like, that jacket would probably be really
Yeah, I know.
comfy to like the blanket on the back of your chair. I'm like, oh, that looks
Yeah.
really comfy. So this is a question I love to ask filmmakers. Looking back on Solstice and the work that you've done, and you were
Mhm.
talking before about getting advice from friends. I always love to
Mhm.
hear what would you say as you've worked on project to project, as you move into the next one? I'm not saying you have to
Mhm.
talk about what that is, and it might be what we talked briefly about off camera before with
Yeah.
the Wake Up Call feature length. What would you say is one of your best practices as a filmmaker that you like to take with you from project to project, and
Mhm.
one learning curve that you would say you try to skirt
Mhm.
around?
It's a great question. I think best practice, something I preach a lot, is just efficiency in my filmmaking and being clever with suggesting things rather than always showing them and being very efficient in the sense of I'm making this by myself, so I maybe might be making a lot more decisions that you don't know are happening as a viewer that I did because it was quicker and easier. But it didn't take away from your experience as a viewer. You don't know what's happening, but I'm doing a lot of very intentional omitting a lot of things. And but so I think it's that's again like a magic trick or a skill to like know when you're doing something, when you're sort of cutting a corner, when you're doing something because it's easier, but knowing that it's not going to be obvious to the viewer. Like you never want to do something and cheap out in the sense, and the viewer thinks like, oh, this guy couldn't afford to do this or didn't have the skill to do this or didn't have time to do it the proper way, and he's showing us like, you know, and you feel it. So I'm trying to balance and walk that line of efficiency that's not noticed, and if anything, it elevates sometimes because you have to come up with clever ways of suggesting something that based on what we spoke about earlier, it's like it's quite rewarding to understand what's happening without always being shown it. Or and then going forward in terms of yeah, learning curve and I mean, I'm on a constant learning curve from. I mean, we spoke earlier off camera before. It's just that my previous films, from all my student work into my first sort of independent stuff on my own, and then now Solstice, you can see it. You can just see the journey I'm on with like the visual fidelity, and some of that's hardware. Some of it's just like I got a better PC and now I can render nicer things. Or I was on limited time at university. You're on like a 6 month deadline or something. You have to, rush through it. And so some of it's that, but most of it is just a keener understanding of filmmaking or of any part in that pipeline. I'm just learning all the time. I don't know if I can point to one thing because I just really think at the end of every project, I learned something on every aspect of the pipeline with that I'm going to take forward. And sometimes it's a case of learning, and sometimes it's a case of feeling like I really enjoyed that process, but my next I might try something completely different so that I can learn something, and be like, okay, I learned all that and I'm happy with where it ended up, but my next film might be just so different that I cannot just repeat the same thing. I have to just like push myself and try something new. Yeah.
Nice. So when audiences leave Solstice, what is something that you hope they carry with them after they watch it?
Hmm. I think it depends who's watching. I mean, by like, if you're just a kid, you know, I don't know, 8 years old or something, you go in and watch Solstice. Part of me is like, if you just take it all literally and you just have a good time and you are on this journey of this character who's, longing for his partner and he gets her back at the end and it's all a happy ending. That's great. I love that. And just take it all at face value and be like, enjoy the experience. It's a really big, cathartic, emotive ending that's all like, the payoff is there and it's the big swell of everything. And just enjoy that moment and be like, oh, what a nice, sweet story, and that's great. And then I think for maybe like a deeper level for like another audience, if they're maybe more keen and into sort of filmmaking and the metaphors that we put in and underlying all of this. It's about dealing with grief and living with grief and the cycles that can happen, that will happen, and you go through these times when you're more reflective and living in the past and longing for someone back or wherever it is you've lost. And then you'll have spells where things are easier and you're able to sort of live with the grief. But ultimately that I think it's almost like so in the film, again, I don't know how spoiler we want to be, but in the film,
It's up to
his
you.
solution to his yeah, his solution to his dealing with his grief is maybe what you wouldn't call like a healthy solution. He like essentially locked himself out like inside his igloo, out trapped himself in there, almost like a tomb. He's like sealing himself in this tomb with this big block of ice in the door to be with his partner he's lost. He's not moving on, he's just being with it. There's a beauty in that, in the sort of in
Mm,
this not letting someone go and just being like, no, I'm not moving on from you. There's like a love so deep that they're not moving on from them, and
mm,
there's something nice there. But it's like it's buried there. It's like we're what we're told is you want to live keep them in your heart and in your life in a sense, but you should move on and like try and live your life and all these other values. So there's just so much there that it's like nothing here is advice. It's just like here's another way of concluding this narrative rather than it being move on from them and meet someone else and maybe the more what you might be told in sort of therapy or something. But like so I wouldn't want this to come across as advice. It's just like to me it's hope maybe it's also just like mm, showing another side to it that's like maybe there is something nice there and there is something beautiful there. Yeah.
mm. And one last question, as this film has been on its journey, what has it meant to you to see this, you know, see a film this quiet and internal connect with audiences and now to receive this BAFTA recognition?
Yeah, and that's what's scary about making it on your own. I have no idea. I have no idea how it's going to land. I mean, it is scary when you put it out there. You submit to festivals and I think I've got something good. I was like, yeah, this is a nice film. I wouldn't put it out there. I wouldn't be finished if I didn't think it was good. Um, but I'm still aware that I can be in a bubble and I can maybe be naive or I'm not sure. It's still scary putting it out there. But then to see it connect as it has, like not, I mean, even before the BAFTAs, like all last year was on the film festival circuit, and just the reception it was getting was, I could tell I had something different than what I had made in the past. It was um hitting at like a deeper level. Again, like I'd mentioned, Alienated was quite a niche audience intentionally. It was a sci-fi, kind of hard sci-fi, but Solstice feels like a bit more of a sort of human story, at least in its not even its themes because Alien has the same themes, but in access to those themes, like you don't need to have an understanding of physics and things. In accessing the themes, they're a lot more accessible. You can get to them easier, and I think that for that reason, people can relate to the same themes as Alienated, but they can relate to them more readily with Solstice, and they can impart their own story into the and the amount of feedback I've had from people with different like completely different forms of grief and what they've been through and dealt with, but like they're relating them with their own story into Solstice has been amazing. Things that I didn't really you don't intend on it, you just put your story out there and people impart their own history. But so in that sense, it's been the festival side of things was incredible, having going around the world essentially and hearing all these different people come up to me and talking about how they really connected with it in different ways. And then the sort of just completely unexpected and BAFTA everything. It's just, I think I'm very humble with, or at least I'm so aware of the talent I'm always up against when I'm in these festivals. But to now be down to the last three, and I don't know, I think it's almost a bit of like disbelief, but also like, I don't know, I'm grateful is not the right word because it's more than that. It's like I just can't believe they've championed this film this far all the way along, and I've seen all the other films that I can't believe I somehow have got further than, and I don't know. Anyway, it's just like whatever's happening behind the scenes and whoever's voting for this and pushing it along, I can only say thank you and for supporting independent solo filmmaking as well. Like there's no big team of people making this; it's just me. And that's it. And to be on that stage, like the biggest stage in film in the UK, it's like quite surreal and quite yeah, it hasn't really sunk in, honestly.
Well, Luke, it is a beautiful film, and all the best of luck to you on this journey. Keep an
Thank
eye
you.
out for Solstice. It's a beautiful, touching film, and have a great day, Luke. Best of luck.
Thanks so much, Mike, and thanks for having me. This was great.